Okay, the Wichita Valley lines, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, the Wichita Valley lines, like Steve mentioned, was 5 different railroad companies that were all part of the Wichita Valley. The original one was the Wichita Valley Railway, which was built between Wichita Falls and Seymour all the way back in 1890. And today on our trip down here, I gave us the, we went on kind of I was joking, it was a 50-cent tour, and we went and visited both depots in Seymour. And the old 1890 Wichita Valley Depot is still standing in Seymour. Now, it's been moved a couple blocks, but it's still there. It's looking kind of the worse for wear, but it still exists. It's the oldest depot that was on that railroad. It's amazing that it's still there. And the Wichita Falls Railroad was the name of the company from Seymour to Stanford. Notice one was the Wichita Valley Railway. They then did a second charter to change the Wichita Valley Railroad. Then you had the Abilene and Northern, which went from Stanford down to Abilene. The Wichita Falls in Oklahoma was their railroad that went from Wichita Falls to Petrolia, Byers, crossed the Red River, and went to Warwick, Oklahoma. And then the Stanford and Northwestern was the line that went from Stanford to Aspermont and ended at Spur. And all 5 of those were owned by the same company. They were all part of the Wichita Valley lines. They shared equipment, they shared locomotives, they shared personnel. It was basically operated as just one company. The Burlington eventually bought it, and it eventually made it part of the Fort Worth and Denver. And so when Stanford lost the Burlington train, that was Burlington Northern by then. But that's basically the history of these 5 railroads and how they all got merged in together. This is a 1906 Wichita Valley Railway Company pass for Mr. Avery Turner Car and Party. So they gave him a pass, and I don't know who his party was, but might have been 4 or 5 people, I don't know, but they got to ride the train for free. The early years. This is in Wichita Falls. The building to the far left is the telegrapher's office. The depot is back behind it with that white sign going across. If you've seen the Wichita Valley Depot in Seymour, it looks a lot like that one. And that was one of the original depots in Wichita Falls. And this is a train, engine number 8. This train's getting ready to leave Wichita Falls and go to Seymour. This is a train stopped at Goree, engine number 1. All the Wichita Valley's locomotives were low numbered, starting with number 1 and going up to about number 14. This is engine number 2. This is the photo that our NRHS chapter uses this photo on a lot of our graphics and everything. That's in Wichita Falls in 1895, just the other day. This is at the Byers Depot on the Wichita Falls in Oklahoma. Notice it's a little mixed train. Wichita Valley was big on mixed trains. A mixed train is a train that's part passenger and part freight. And so it's got some passenger cars in the back and the freight cars are up in the front. They called it a mixed. And this is engine number, looks like number 4 to me. This is at Petrolia, and this is was photographed back during the middle of the big oil boom out there in northern Clay County. Just look at all those tank cars. And those tank cars appear to be nothing more than homemade tanks resting on a flat car. Yeah, that's what they are. They didn't have a way to turn the trains out there at Petrolia, so they would run out one direction and have to shut the thing all the way back to Wichita Falls. That's why the exhaust is going the wrong way in this photograph. Now this is the very first train to Spur. So this was the railroad that went from Stanford to Aspermont, Jayton, Girard, and up to Spur. Very first day. Notice once again, it's a mixed train. This is at Sagert. I guess that's how you pronounce that. Sagert, it's a long A, okay, Sagert. Notice that whoever did this photograph misspelled the name of the town. They got Segarto and a backwards N. So, but it looks like a full bore passenger train in that photo.
Yeah.
And this is at Jayton, another full passenger train, 1912 on this. And this is at Aspermont. So, you know, they had some full passenger trains, but like the line up to Waurika just never was that profitable, so they always ran a mix on that. I am happy to say that my grandfather was a construction worker on that railroad when they built it from Byers across the river to Waurika. He worked on that bridge. He hated it because every time we'd have a rainy spring, Red River would wash that bridge out. The Valley Doodlebug, now that's my favorite. That was the passenger train that went from Wichita Falls to Abilene. And there it is. It's a one-car, self-propelled railroad car. It's got, the controls are up in the front. Then it's got the motor directly under that exhaust up on the roof. Then you've got a RPO section, that's the mail section where the post office had an office. Then you got Railway Express Agency in the doorway where the two guys are. That's where parcels and big packages and stuff like that would go. And then what passengers would ride back in the back where the windows are. And then during World War II, they got enough business where they added an extra coach back there. But this is at Wichita Falls. That's the old Wichita Falls ice plant. No longer there, but it's parked there next to it. And that's our depot on the extreme right. There's another shot of it. If you look through that doorway, you can see the motor up in the front. Now these things were built to where that front wheel assembly, I'm gonna call it a truck, was powered, and the back wasn't. So the only pulling mechanism that you had was the motor up front and the power truck directly under it.
Now that was clutch drivetrain like a semi truck. More or less, wasn't it? It wasn't traction motors.
Yeah, had traction motors. There was a traction motor mounted to both axles. Another shot of it. Seems like this thing was always photographed there in Wichita Falls at the ice plant. They would bring that train in and turn it on the line and back it in on that track. So if you were a passenger, you would have to walk out of Wichita Falls Union Station, walk about a half block to get to this. Since it never rains in Wichita Falls, it really wasn't much of a problem. Now this is in 1945, and they've added an extra coach to it. But if you look at that extra coach, look at the back of it, it's got an extra little baggage section also. Now I'm not sure if they ever used it, but it was on that car. But I like that photo. It's got good clouds and everything, but that's what they're doing. You can see the engineer is leaning out of the cab and he's looking back. So they're backing this into the depot. Now this train ran on 2 schedules during its career. It started off running out of Abilene every day, and it would go to Wichita Falls, lay over, get turned around and go back to Abilene. And then in the late part of World War II, they shifted it to where that it left Wichita Falls every morning, went to Abilene, turned around and came back. I'm not exactly sure what the reason for the change was. The only thing I can guess is they were trying to schedule it up in Wichita Falls to make connections maybe with the Texas Zephyr or some of the other trains that went through Wichita Falls. Okay, here's the same car backed into the depot at Abilene. Abilene had a dead-end station. The trains would come in and back in. That depot is still there. It's the one over the building over on the left.
South first, yeah.
Yeah. And they would back in. They used to have a little bumper back there, and you'd back all the way up to that. I've noticed over the years they kept shortening that track. It used to be a whole lot longer. I don't know if Coroner knew that. The building you can barely see off to the right was a separate Railway Express wood freight depot. And this is in Abilene, 1949. And it's pulling a World War II ex-Army troop sleeper. There was a lot of those cars built during the war for troop movements, and after the World War II was over, the Army sold them off to whoever wanted to buy them. A lot of the railroads bought them, gutted them out, and made extra baggage cars out of them. And that's what we've got here. And notice there's a gas pump right there. That's for fueling that thing when it got to Abilene. Oops. Believe it or not, this was photographed on the last day that they ran. The train came out of Wichita Falls at that time, went to Abilene, turned around, went back. And when the train got to Abilene, this lady pulled out in front of it and had her little kid with her and got hit pretty good. Both of them walked away from it. But of all things, to hit somebody on the last day of the train run. And here's the crew. My grandfather knew Mr. Jeter, he's the engineer. And he had the reputation for, if you've ever been to Wichita Falls and you know what the Kell Freeway is, that used to be where the railroad went. They tore the Wichita Valley out to build that freeway. And the railroad would cross Brook and Harrison and Taft and Kent, a lot of north-south streets, and he was notorious for hitting stupid motorists that pull out in front of him. I'm shocked that he didn't have a rubber stamp of the doodlebug or a car, I guess a car, and every time he clipped once, stamp a car on the side of the engine. But that was Mr. Jeter. This is in Abilene, and that's the back of the car. Now this particular doodlebug had controls on both ends. They didn't have to turn it, now they always did, because you had better visibility out of the other end.
Yeah.
But it had cab controls back there in the back. Notice it's got a little small headlight back there on the back. The only time they'd use it is if they were turning it, had to go in reverse a little bit. They would turn the doodlebug at Wichita Falls and Abilene on a Y. If you don't know what a Y is, why, I don't know. No, it's basically, if you'll picture a giant triangle, the train would first go one way, they'd throw a switch, then back around this way, throw another switch, and now it's going back cab first again. And it was an easy way to turn without having a turntable. And they spelled it W-Y-E. Here we are in Stanford, the last day. This is the last train in Stanford. Don't know if mom's taking her kids down there to see the last train, probably so. And this is taken on the east side of Stanford Union Station, which is everybody in here from Stanford know where the depot used to be. Yeah, y'all were talking about historical things. There's your project. Try to get you a historical marker located down there where the depot used to be. Here they are unloading packages out of the baggage RPO. He's got a baggage cart out there and he's unloading those packages. I assume that somebody's either gonna catch that or it's gonna bounce.
It's marked fragile.
No, it's marked fragile.
It's probably like tagging.
And then here's an old man, probably in his 80s or 90s, that's gone down there to see the last train. And a little further up the road, here's the last train when it got to Haskell, and they're loading it up with school kids. And now we're at Seymour. This depot is still there. Julia, where are you at, hon? Yeah, this is the one we went and looked at. The wood one. It's still there. It's moved about 2 blocks. It's turning completely opposite direction now. But that was the 1890 Wichita Valley Depot. It still exists. Now the other depot in Seymour was Union Station, and it was used by the Wichita Valley and by the Gulf, Texas and Western. And it's still there. It looks to be in pretty good shape. Okay, this photo, Julia, this is the one I was telling you about that was taken there in Seymour. downtown Seymour, you know, they've torn the courthouse down and replaced it with a modern one. So, but that was taken down there within a block of the courthouse. This is in Wichita Falls. That is our Union Station behind it that's got the tower. And it was built 1910 and torn down beginning late December of 1967. They started tearing it down about 3 months after we lost our passenger train. It was offered to the city of Wichita Falls for $1. And the city said, no, we don't want it. You read that. This is at Spur. I think this photo's on your display back here in the back, I'm not mistaken. But that's the Spur Depot. If you look at it, it's kind of similar to the one that's still in Seymour, the Wood Depot. And here's another train there in Seymour. Now that tank car that you see behind the engine, that's an extra water car. They had bad water out there on that line to go to Spur. It was real jippy and it would screw up the boilers and cause all kinds of corrosion and stuff. So they got to where they would take these little water cars. It was a tank car just like you'd haul oil in, but it was just built for company water service. They'd fill that thing up here in Stanford and it could go all the way to Spur and back without having to be refilled. That tank car. There's another shot of it. Little bitty engines. Little tiny ones. All these photos were taken in Spur.
So that was an oil burner?
Yeah. Yeah, when built, it was a coal burner. But Fort Worth and Denver had converted almost every railroad in Texas converted to oil in the 1910s. That's when oil really became you had all the major oil strikes around Corsicana, Spindletop, all that. Nobody used coal after that. The Wichita Falls and southern out of Wichita Falls built in Newcastle, Texas for the sole purpose of tapping those coal mines for the railroad. But within 3 years, they discovered there's more oil in the ground than there ever was coal. So they converted them. If you look at that tender, that bunker that's up on top, that's the oil bunker. And the rest of the tender, the long part, that's water. Steam engines burned water 3 times to 1 ratio, water to oil. This is at Brook Street, Wichita Falls. If you're familiar with Wichita Falls, this is going down to Kell Freeway now.
Who's the photographer?
This is Theron Baber.
Oh.
Theron took this. He took this one too. This is at Fairway. Fairway don't look like that. Now, if you go to this same spot today, we've got a massive United Market Street at this same location. Massive. This is here in Stanford. There's the Stanford Roundhouse. Now, I will point out, of all the places that the Wichita Valley went, they only had 1 roundhouse and 1 turntable, and it was here. In Wichita Falls, they used the Fort Worth and Denver turntable roundhouse. But the only one that they had themselves was this one here in Stanford. It was the only one they ever built. This is at Mankins. We went through Mankins today, Julia.
Yes, sir.
It don't look like that now, does it?
No, sir.
And see, it's even got a water car on it. Now, they had 2 kinds of freight steam engines that they used on the Wichita Valley. The 200s were the little baby 280s. They didn't have much of a water capacity. And then they also ran 400s out there, and they were larger. There's the 205. That's another one of the little ones. That's a good shot showing that oil bunker standing up, sitting up on the tender. Here's one of the larger 400s, and it's got a water car behind it as well. This is at Dundee. Got a long freight train heading to Stanford and Abilene.
Look out for camels.
Watch out for what?
For camels
Yeah, camels.
at Dundee.
I remember when there was camels up there by Iowa Park and Electric, right next to the railroad track. The best ones were the ones that had Dick Worsham between Henrietta and Bellevue. There was a herd of them down there, probably about 2 dozen. does it. I always used to go down there and try to line up, taking pictures of Burlington trains in the background with the camels up front.
Steve, those larger 400 series, was that the same Mikado engine series that the Fort Worth and Denver sold one to T&P to
Yeah,
run in East
yeah,
Texas?
Yeah, same one.
Number-
Same identical size, same class, same everything.
Yeah,
Number
Now, there was
14.
different groups of 400s now.
yeah,
The low 400s is like the one down at Marshall,
right.
and that went up to what, 410?
410, it
401
was,
to 410?
401.
And then it skipped all the way up to, the 450s,
Okay,
and the largest ones they had was 463 and 460, was there a 4? I think it might have been 462 and 463, they were the biggest ones, largest ones.
but they were all the 282.
All 282s, that's the largest steam engine that Fort Worth and Denver own.
Yeah,
Now, there was a few rare occasions that I can document where that there were some larger engines off the parent CB&Q
right,
that they brought down, but they didn't own.
they didn't own those,
No.
yeah.
Steve, is that bridge still intact, or is it?
Yeah, we saw it today when we
Yeah,
came through Seymour. Look off to, the south, and the spans are still there, still bright silver, you can see right where the bridge was. Now, the approaches that went out to the steel part have been removed, I guess, to keep people from walking out on it. I'm not sure, to me, I think Seymour could have done something with that bridge, made a hiking trail, bike trail, something on it, instead of doing what they did. I'm kinda amazed that the scrap company didn't try to sell those spans, you know, to anybody. Farmer Brown might needed a bridge out on his ranch, and here you go, you had a whole bunch of it, it's still there, we looked today. All the way down here, I tried to show, Julia every little thing. So she now knows where all the red ant beds are out there. This is the very first Fort Worth and Denver SD7 tablet. Now, these SD7s was, 850 through 860. There was 11 of them. They were 1500 class, 1500 horsepower. They rode on 2 3-axle trucks, so they had a total of 6 axles on them. And they were state of the art when they came out in the 1950s. They also had a steam generator up in the nose on the short end of it, to where that they could also pull passenger trains, because they had a steam
You can see it
generator.
in the picture, stack is sticking up right.
Yeah, the stack's sticking up, that's right. The unique thing about these SD7s, and it took even me a long time to figure it out. I kept seeing these SD7s, and some of them said everywhere west, and some of them said way of the Zephyrs. And I actually made me a list and started writing down the numbers and putting what was written on that particular engine, so that if I could ever model one, I knew how to paint and decal it. Little did Stevie know back in the 60s that they painted everywhere west on the fireman's side and way of the Zephyrs on the same engine on the engineer side. And I didn't figure that out till I'm looking at my list and I'm going, no, I just got through seeing this engine in Electra and it said this. Now it says this, it's a magical engine, you know what, but that's what they did. So a lot of these, all the SD7s and most of their little tinier switch engines like the SW1s and NW2s, they had the safety slogan on it too. So it said everywhere west on one side, way the Zephyrs on that. Now later on, Micro Scale Decal Company came out with Burlington decals to do these black and gray units. And they were smart, there it is, way the Zephyrs, everywhere west. So when I got around to painting me up some of them, I got them painted right. But little young Stevie, I couldn't figure that out. Depots and facilities. It's the depot in Petrolia, where my great-grandmother lived. And all the depots on this railroad use the same style train order signal. You see it, it was built like this, one end was If it turned one way, it was go, the other way was stop. And I had one. And I finally sold it 2 years ago to a guy from Wisconsin. He found out I had that thing. He drove all the way down here to pick it up. It's big.
Backing up to your, roundhouse, a while ago, I was always under the impression that the Texas Central built that roundhouse and, but did they both use it? Or?
Yeah, no, it was strictly Burlington. No. Here's the depot at Holiday. Notice it's got the same little train order signal on it. I probably shouldn't have sold it, but when I got like this, I started figuring, why do I need something that big and that heavy? Cause it weighed a ton. Here's the depot in Seymour. Now, this is the one that's still there today that I took Julie out there. Notice all the signs on it. It's got a Porcelain Railway Express Agency sign on it, and it's got one of those signals on the operator's bay window. This depot kinda looks like this today, it's just in a whole lot worse shape, a lot worse. Here they are building the Brazos River Bridge, 1906. I wouldn't have wanted that job. Look at those two guys hanging off the side of that. Here's the depot at Bomerton, or Beaumartin, however you pronounce it. I know.
Bomerton.
Bomerton's how I've always called it.
Yeah.
Here's the one at Mundy. Now, if you look real close, what's happened to this Mundy depot? Can you tell? They cut the waiting room off.
Mm-hmm.
Sodded off, made a wall right there. That's why it's so short. That's why there's no passenger waiting room on the right side. So they'd already shortened that depot. The reason they would do stuff like that was taxes. Shorten the depot, you less your square footage. They didn't have to pay as much tax. We came through there today. It's just sad to look at where the railroad used to go there. Here's Weiner. This is the depot in Haskell. This is Stanford Union Station. Now we're looking south down the valley, which is over on the left side. So the Katy track is behind this depot. So we're looking south toward Abilene.
Steve,
Yes.
Steve, can you go back to the Haskell slide, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go.
What color scheme would that have been? Any idea?
Well, it's still sitting out there. And you
Yeah,
see
it's
some
still
color
sitting
on
out
it.
there.
Well, it's
Yeah.
been bright red since the 1980s,
Yeah.
or kind of a boxcar red, but
Well,
I
see,
just
the
wonder.
Wichita Valley started painting a lot of their stuff kind of, I'm gonna call it mineral red,
Yeah,
kind of a buff color.
but that
You
doesn't
can
look
tell
like,
this one's not red.
no.
I don't know. This might have been some sort of,
Looks like a tan or brown.
yeah, tan, brown. I don't know.
Now,
Now, the neat thing about Haskell is the only one that had this little portico, this little porch area that came
Right.
up.
Yeah.
And when I first saw this depot, that's one of the things that, when it was a museum in the park, they moved it and moved those things and had it to where it was all done the right way. I've never understood what the story is on what happened to the Haskell Depot, because I know the railroad donated it to them. Gave them the whole depot, they moved it to that park over just south of downtown and put it all up and set it up as a Wichita Valley Museum.
I can tell you exactly what happened to it, but I don't know if you want that story right now or not.
Floor's yours.
Well, so when they donated it, they, for reasons passing understanding, it was actually donated to Haskell County because the county had a historical society.
Okay.
They donated it to the county, but the county didn't really want it. The only place they could find to put it was on the city-owned park.
Okay.
So they moved it the 3 or 4 blocks down to the city park, and that's where it sat for about 20 years.
That's where I would have
That's
seen
where
it.
you saw it, was there, on the banks, next to the banks of the creek.
And it was an open museum.
It was
back
an
then.
open museum, it had become a Haskell County museum by that point.
Okay.
Except the city and the county never really did get along with the fact that it was a county-owned building on city property. And then beginning in the 80s, when the lawyers all took over and everybody got worried about liability insurance, nobody wanted jurisdiction over the thing. And so it was about that time that the local historical society dissolved and the ownership passed over to a ladies' nonprofit organization there in town. Well, it eventually folded as well, and then the county sold the building to a local businessman with the understanding that he would move it at his own expense. He did, and he moved it out south of town where it's been sitting now for 30 some odd years. And it's just about to fall down. It's very, very dilapidated and deteriorated.
Now let me ask you a question. You may have even been the one that told me this. But driving down today, I was trying to tell Julia the history. And I swore somebody told me a story about when it was still downtown, that somebody arranged to have the local Boy Scouts go clean
Yes.
that depot up.
Yes.
Clean up, not clean out.
Well,
They went down there and instead of just cleaning the depot, which was a museum by then, they went down there and they cleaned out
cleaned it out, yes.
and disposed of everything.
Well, and it wasn't supposed to have been disposed of, it was supposed to have been put into storage, but a couple of years later, when I asked the Boy Scout leader about it, nobody knew where anything was, and so the contents of the old county museum, those contents are long gone.
So it was cleaned out. Yeah, that's sad. Cause it was a nice museum. I mean, you could go in there and find just about anything you wanted on the Wichita Valley. They had like a full collection of Wichita Valley saddle blanket timetables. Now, if you don't know what a saddle blanket timetable, a long time ago, the railroads had enormous timetables. They were every bit that long and that tall. You had to open them up, and they called them saddle blankets because they were that big. It's not the little pocket timetables like you think of. And they had a full set of them.
Yeah.
And when I heard that story, I asked about that, and they said, no, they went in there, the kids were told to clean it up. They did what they were told, so they went in there and threw all that stuff away.
They had a complete set of ticket stamps.
Yep.
Of any place you could buy a railroad ticket to, they had
Yep.
stamps for those.
Yep.
There were they had a complete telegrapher's telephone set up with an old accordion style phone on a wall mount that would pull away from scissors phones.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And they had one of those. They had an old pot-bellied stove. They had an old school Link from the old Lincoln Penn coupler days,
Yeah.
predating the modern safety coupler. They had an old Link from one of those coupling systems. The stuff that was in there was priceless.
Yeah.
And I saw it all when I was there in the early 80s and was on the Historical Society. We moved away for 5 or 6 years. By the time I moved back in the late 80s, it was gone. The building had been emptied out and everything was lost.
Yeah, there used to be a text dot sign on the road going through Haskell that said Railroad Museum and pointed down that way. That's how I found out. My first trip there was in 1969, probably June. And I talked to my grandparents and my mom into, let's take a little daily trip.
Detour.
Because I was in junior high, I wasn't done. So I had them take me to Seymour, Bundy, Haskell, to Stanford. And I talked them into going to Hamlin and Rotan, and then we cut up by the Double Mountains and hit Aspermont, and then picked up the Orient over at, Sagerton,
Mm-hmm.
and then followed it all the way north to Benjamin and then went home. But that's the day that I caught it open, and I thought, this is so cool. Wichita Falls tears our depot down. Here's this little town, got priceless antiques in it. They had lanterns, I think they had some whistles, headlights, all kinds of stuff was in there. And then, you know, I went back down there to, I was dating Marcia at the time, and I said, oh, we're going through Haskell, I wanna take you down there and show you this museum. It's gone. The whole thing was gone.
The only two things that are left, there's a locomotive bell, one of the heavy duty brass bells.
Yeah.
That is mounted, right off downtown, next to the fire station.
Okay.
That bell is up, it's pretty high up, but it's still there, right on Highway 380. So it would be, if you go through town, going 277 north,
Yeah.
it would be 2 blocks east,
Back to the east.
back towards, between the old highway and the bypass.
Okay, north
So-
or south side of the road.
It's on the south side of the road,
All right,
right next to the fire station.
Okay.
And then the other thing that is still remaining from the museum is the original historical marker that the highway department put up on the building itself is now in the county library, which is a couple of blocks north of downtown.
And see, I always thought when buildings like this got a historical designation
You couldn't touch
and a marker was put on it, you couldn't mess with it.
Oh, no.
That's what I thought. So, real quick on his story, he named some of that stuff off. I'm not telling you this to brag, but just to let you know some of it, not what he mentioned still exists, but I've got the same type item. I've got 2 steam locomotive bells. I've got baggage carts. I did have, like I said, I had one of them signals. For Stanford people, I have the ticket validator from Stanford Union Station.
Yeah, just along that same sort of line, you got a guy up in Louisville that looks like he's got an assortment of stuff that probably pulled when they pulled out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's got just strung around in the backyard,
Yeah.
but it's kept it nice.
There's a lot of value to this. One of the things I always try to sell these towns on is, don't be quick to tear this stuff down. You're sitting on something. You've got a gold mine here, you just don't realize what you got. So,
Well, I'm happy to say that times are different now.
yeah,
And 45 years ago, when I asked our county commissioners court for some funding for the historical society, I was basically laughed out of the room. And our current commissioners court is very much into preserving and facilitating the historical commission, and we have a lot more support now than we've ever enjoyed officially.
that's good, that's good. Well, at least my story on what happened to it must be true. And I remember somebody told me that years and years ago, and I was telling Julia that coming down here, that I was told they cleaned it out. They were supposed to clean it up, but they cleaned it
Steve.
up. Yeah.
Is Eddie Haskell in that photo?
He could be. They named the town after him. And they named one of them Oklahoma after the beaver.
There's one in Kansas too.
What about Ward and June?
There's a Ward, Texas, or Ward County, Texas. Okay, going back to this is Stanford Union Station, which was built down at the junction of Katy, basically east-west, and Wichita Valley, basically a north-south.
Are there any interior photos of that depot?
I wish. And here is the roundhouse and engine facilities, which were over southwest of downtown.
So Steve, how do they load the oil into the tenders?
Gravity. You just drop that spigot and fill the oil. There's a hatch up on top of the tender.
Because some of those oil burners actually had to have heat in them to get the oil to flow.
Yeah, you had to heat a lot of that
Steam
stuff.
heater.
They
Yeah,
just pull some
heat.
steam
The
line back
engine
Yeah,
would heat 'em.
pump the steam line through it, yeah.
Yeah, cause it don't flow too good when it's cold. Of course, here in Texas, we never have to worry about the cold.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Hear you
this-
tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, tomorrow morning. This is the, depot at Anson. This is the second depot at Anson. They would've had a wood one to begin with, and I don't know what happened to it, and I've never seen a photograph of it. But this is the one that was there, when they were still running the Doodlebug. This photo actually was taken the last day of the Doodlebug.
Hmm.
And you can see it's a brick depot.
What
That's the
streets?
only one on the line that was built that way.
What street's that?
Train Street,
Alright.
I don't know.
Commerce Street.
And then here's the one Coroner is trying to get, and I hope that he can get it. This is, the station at Abilene. Now, this was a replacement depot as well. The original depot in Abilene was wood, and then they built this one. This has always been one of my favorites anywhere in the state, Texas, Oklahoma, I don't care where. I like it because it's one of the very few non-symmetrical depots you will find. No two walls match. It's odd. The south wall is a lot longer than the north wall. The east side is a lot shorter than the west side. It's odd, but that's what makes it unique. And I hope that they save it. Notice it's got those cast concrete Burlington Root logos made in the building.
That's the one that's, Southern Switching, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Years
years
ago.
ago. South Third and Cherry Streets in Abilene.
Right.
Oh.
Now,
And right where the photographer is standing is now Makefield Paper Company.
okay,
So was that built by the Wichita Valley or by the?
Burlington.
Fort Worth, okay.
Fort Worth and Denver. On paper, it was still Wichita Valley till what, 54, 53?
Something like that.
Yeah. Now, when they built the new replacement depot in Childers, they built it also with these cast concrete Burlington Root logos. If you look at this picture, you can see there's one logo up above the word Abilene in the center. And then there's another one on the corner. And I think that's the only ones it had. I can't see one over on this other corner. But the depot in Childers had 3 of them. And when they knocked it down, I got all 3 of them. 2 of them are in my backyard. The third one, when it hit the ground, it broke it in 2. And I went ahead and got it and brought it back to Wichita Falls. I bought all of those things at an auction in Childers where they were selling the contents of the depot. And they'd already torn the depot down, but they had these things. I paid like $3 for all 3 of them.
Wow.
And they weigh a ton. But I took them back to Wichita Falls and put them in my backyard where I used to live. And we finally moved in, what year was it, Marcia? 92. And I took the 2 good ones with me to our new house, and I still have them. The third one that had broken too, I just left it. And finally, this past year, John, what's his name? Swanson. John Swanson went over to that house and made a deal with the people that owned it, and it was still in the backyard right where I left it. He claims that he bought it. So I would have taken it too, but I was tired of moving railroad stuff. These things, like I said, they weigh a lot. When I went and picked them up, I could only get one at a time, so that was 3 trips to Childers to get these things. And I could have got the depot bench seats. And I didn't have a truck or a trailer to do it, or I would have. And they did get saved, they're inside the Childers Museum. But I had first right to buy them, and I just didn't buy them.
Nobody else bought them.
I had no way to move them, nobody else wanted them. And it just broke my heart. I told my wife, I said, we gotta find some way to move them. I couldn't find anybody that'd help me. I would've paid somebody to move them for me. But this is the depot there in Abilene, and like I said, I wish him luck. Notice it's got that one giant concrete ball mounted down there on the one corner. That's another one of the things I've always remembered about this. You don't have those old light standards there anymore, do you, Corner?
No.
Didn't think you did. When you buy it, you'll have to buy one.
Got it.
And there's what it looked like.
That's all, one came up for sale on marketplace.
I think it's been for sale, hasn't it?
Do what?
Yeah.
Has it been for sale?
Yes.
Yes.
5 years.
How much are they wanting?
The depot and 5 acres for 1.8 million.
Oh, that's easy. We can raise that,
1.8 million.
we can raise that one day. And then
Are we
this
gonna take
was
up an
the,
offering before we go?
and then this was the, Wichita Valley Freight Depot that was there in Abilene, which was right next door to it.
So that building is now, I think it's that same building got moved
That's southern.
a couple of blocks north onto,
And the live.
South First Street and is now a bar.
That was the Abilene Southern Freight Depot.
Oh, was it?
Yeah,
Okay.
which, in this
Sorry.
picture, if you look back off to the left, would be that one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that, the photo there is, that's the remaining section of the Abilene and Northern Depot. So when they built that brick depot that we just had up there,
Yeah.
they tore down the passenger section of the Abilene and Northern Depot.
I'm going the wrong way.
Now, were they connected to the Abilene Southern?
No.
Abilene Northern?
Well, the
Northern
Abilene
was a
and
different-
Southern used the Wichita Valley's tracks
Okay,
between Abilene and Anson.
okay.
They didn't have their own railroad, and then when they got to Anson, they would cut off and head up toward Hamlin. Yeah. So they were kinda related in a way.
They
but
worked together but weren't the same company?
No, never were. And that's the depot that was out at Spur.